Wow, the prequel haters are really gonna hate me with this one. Attack of the Clones was the second entry of the prequel trilogy, setting up the origins of the Clone Wars and giving clues on how the Empire came to be, as well as telling the story of how the Clone Wars started, what it was about, and why it was called that. Ever since 1977, fans were wondering what the Clone Wars was. It was just a piece of world building, but boy would it need to be fleshed out, so on it goes. The hate this movie got probably came from surface level analysis, watching the behind the scenes videos, as well as thinking as why things that happened in the movie happened, paints a brighter picture than what was originally perceived, but we'll discuss that when we get to the review. What do I think of this movie? I only think the reason the romance was off-putting was because I didn't like the romance genre, like a lot of kids my age, but I still watched it because there was more to it than that. Now let's review this movie, shall we? The story automatically starts with getting to the point. The crawl well establishes the state of the Republic and the driving force for the story, the separatist movement that wants to leave the Republic. An assassination attempt on Senator Padme Amidala leaves a Jedi to step in to protect her. The two Jedi assigned are Obi-Wan Kenobi and the 19-year-old Anakin Skywalker. His introduction is great. His arc in this movie is very well presented when he acts so awkward around Padme. One thing you might not notice is that Anakin has been living a celibate life of a Jedi, and since he was a non-traditional Jedi, he built pre-world views before he joined the Order. It makes sense for him to build attachments, especially since his mother is presumably still on Tatooine. We can also tell there is a feud between Obi-Wan and Anakin. People have called this a continuity error since Obi-Wan described Anakin to Luke in A New Hope as a friend, but here's something to take into consideration. Obi-Wan is a liar. Even with the context of the original trilogy, he kept the secret of Vader's identity from Luke, but the prequels already adds to this character trait. The fact that Obi-Wan is a fibber, this is character consistency, especially since people will also make the complaint that Obi-Wan does many of the things Anakin does. He's also a hypocrite. Obi-Wan is a flawed character despite his training. He's no Larry Stoop despite his powers, unlike some other characters in the franchise. So point is, Anakin and Obi-Wan are assigned to protect Amidala. People complain about the sequence for being ridiculous, and question why the assassin droid didn't just shoot Padme. Well, take it from Jango Fett. He said that they needed to be more subtle this time, so he gave Zam a quiet little poisonous bug container to kill Padme, but he didn't take into account the Jedi. And once again, Obi-Wan is a flawed character, which is why he makes the reckless split-second decision to jump out the window. George Lucas wanted to portray this as just another day on the job for them. The banter between Anakin and Obi-Wan during this chase is great. I especially like the fact that Anakin says that he couldn't find a speeder that he really liked. The chase is intense because we know what's at stake if the assassin gets away. The cantina scene is great for that reason. They disarm the assassin and bring her outside, where before she can talk, she gets hit with a poison dart by the mysterious assassin before he flies off. Anakin is assigned to protect Padme on Naboo, while Obi-Wan investigates the trail the assassin left. He meets his friend Dexter Jetzer in his diner, who tells him he has a Kamino saber dart. Obi-Wan finds the planet Kamino after some digging, and comes across the Kaminoans. They reveal that someone ordered the creation of a clone army. He also meets the clone template individual Jango Fett, the adoptive father of Boba Fett, who is also in this movie. Jango essentially denies any part in the assassination, but it's not long before Obi-Wan realizes he's the assassin. He puts a tracking beacon on Jango's ship as he and his son escape. Obi-Wan tracks the two to a planet named Geonosis, where the Separatists, the group established that wanted to leave the Republic, are meeting. Obi-Wan is then captured by the Seps and is sentenced to death in the Geonosian arena. I like this segment of the movie because everything is mysterious. It engages you into the story despite being a prequel. This is how JJ could have, and honestly should have, approached his mystery box filmmaking philosophy. Because when George does it better than you, and especially since you're the poster boy for mystery boxes, it just proves you should have listened to George and used his story outlines for the sequel trilogy. This part of the movie is like a detective movie. And seeing mystery in Star Wars is just a unique way to tell a story with laser swords and spaceships. When it comes to what Anakin and Padme are doing, it's often criticized, but the scenes are character consistent. Anakin is a non-traditional Jedi nurtured two different ways, and Padme is a politician. And anyone who knows anything about politics knows that no politician is open about their feelings. Ever. And since this romance is very different to any other movie about romance, where the two lovers are charismatic to the core, Attack of the Clones defies common tropes seen in the genre. Attack of the Clones has a romantically illiterate Jedi try to flirt with a politician who hasn't had much experience with this type of stuff either. People criticize it for being awkward and cringy when that's entirely the point. Anakin is struggling to deal with his emotions. That's the conflict. The only reason he succeeds at the end is because he's the first one to advance on Padme, and because circumstances once they get captured force them to open up about each other. Scenes such as the politics talk aren't actually bad. Not only is Anakin's idea for a fascist society clever foreshadowing, but it still makes sense for why Padme falls in love with him. It's because Anakin realizes she didn't approve of fascism and turned it into a joke. What was it about George not understanding romance again? George understood romance just fine. He's been married twice, so he knows everything about it. It's just that most people most likely had a different perspective on who Darth Vader was. Vader was never intended to be a badass. He's supposed to be a tragic character at its core. And it's pretty tragic to see Anakin get pushed around, lose his mother, and fail at his charisma points in Fallout. This can be proven on how people say Yoda with a lightsaber is character assassination when it's not. Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker were created by the same guy. Do you not think George would know his franchise well enough? So anyways, Anakin has visions about his mother's suffering, and so on to Tatooine. Anakin tracks down Watto, who tells him he sold her freedom to a moisture farmer called Klieg Lars. So Anakin goes to the Lars homestead, and they tell him that his mother has been kidnapped by Tusken Raiders. Anakin then arrives too late as his mother gives in to her wounds. This is where Anakin goes mental. He kills every single Tusken Raider, the men, the women, and the children. No savages left alive. It's here where we see how angry and upset Anakin is, with more clever foreshadowing and character development. Eventually, Mace Windu, the second in command of the Jedi under Master Yoda, informs Anakin that Obi-Wan has been captured. Mace orders Anakin to continue his mission to protect the Senator. Padme then forces Anakin to go to Geonosis to help Obi-Wan. They too get captured. Obi-Wan, Padme, and Anakin are tied up to be executed in an arena, but thankfully the Jedi show up. Mace Windu cuts off Jango's head, and when the Jedi is surrounded, Yoda and the clone army show up to rescue the survivors. We get a full-on battle, as the Jedi's terrible tactics lead to many 9-year-old clones running to their deaths, and the Jedi chase Count Dooku. After a battle between Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Dooku, the Master and Apprentice lose to Dooku. Thankfully, Yoda stops Dooku, but he still gets away. The Clone Wars begins, the clone armies prep for all-out war, and Anakin and Padme secretly marry on Naboo. The end. A story made for kids manages to be an in-depth psychic study on the flaws of the Jedi Order and how to deal with emotions. We don't feel bad for the Tusken Raiders. They're savages. And we understand why Anakin wiped all of them out. George Lucas is starting to put the pieces together and eventually building up to where Anakin finally cracks in Revenge of the Sith. This movie did a good job at expanding the universe. This is the first time the Jedi are fleshed out and prominently shown in their peak. We found out in this movie that the Jedi are more like monks than warriors. Luke, as it turns out, is a very unconventional Jedi in the OT. I'm going to give 7 points to the story. Like Empire, this movie had some stiff competition in the writing section. So while the film is pretty phenomenal on its own, other Star Wars movies surpass it a lot. This movie looks bloody amazing. This film is second only to Revenge of the Sith in terms of visual storytelling. The Battle of Geonosis says so much. This is a full-on battle that indicates the start of a bloody war. On a smaller scale, I love the shots including Anakin searching for his mother. From the speeder bike shot all the way to him going mental. Look at this shot. Along with the John Williams music, which we'll get to later, as soon as you see Anakin's expression, you know shit has hit the fan and this story is going to take a dark turn. Exterior shots showing you locations are pretty good too, such as Camino and Geonosis. The cantina shots of Obi-Wan and Anakin chasing the assassin are excellent, building up the tension until the assassin strikes. The editing is weaker than the shots though. There are some weaknesses in the pacing, only slightly, but enough for you to notice them. Given the hordes of deleted scenes for this movie, expanding the story that had to be cut out due to time purposes, maybe one day the extended cut can be released. There was a lot left to be decided. They glossed over the Jango and Obi-Wan conversation a little too fast, I think. They could have gone into more detail there. The Sifo DS thing could have gotten some more explanation for an easier time understanding everything. As for how they paced the Anakin and Padme scenes, some scenes seem a bit pointless. The political discussion is there for foreshadowing, but others are there to expand the romance subplot, and they're not really that important. That's not to say that they have no relevance, it's just so that they come across as the least important scenes in the movie. But seeing the scenes George did cut out were not directly relevant to the main story, it's best that we appreciate how George paced everything. I'm going to give 8 points to the cinematography/editing. It's time to give credit where credit is due. Attack of the Clones pioneered digital filmmaking technology. George Lucas pushed for a special effects team to invent new technology that they didn't even know would work. Stuff like the Clone Wars and the battle between Yoda and Dooku, in which they had Christopher Lee, and not a body double, fight alone on screen and digitally putting Yoda in afterwards. Complain all you want about no practical effects, this film had plenty of practical effects. You'd be surprised to learn that the Geonosian Arena was an actual set they made. Kit Fisto isn't CGI, the Cantina in Coruscant isn't CGI, Palpatine's office isn't CGI, they still had the practical shit. I think this movie blends in with the CGI with the practical effects very well, to the point where immersion is stronger than ever. The visual design is simply phenomenal. It feels like a great expansion of the first prequel in every way, and even the original trilogy, giving the precursor armor to Boba Fett, along with other sellable costumes such as the clone troopers, the Jedi, and casual attire on Coruscant. Fantastic designs to help drive toy sales. The new aliens are really great. Kit Fisto is a fan favorite Jedi of the prequels and was so badass that he lasts 5 seconds longer than the other two Jedi during Palpatine's arrest. The Kaminoans are a new design, they just fit perfectly with the clone profession. I can't put my finger on why, this just feels like an expansion of the previous movie. As for the sets, there was a lot of stuff shot in front of a green screen. They still managed to look great though. For the practical sets and miniatures, in which there was quite a lot of, they look amazing. The Camino facility is top tier in terms of Star Wars locations. I think these new locations are some of the best in the entire series. Huge praise for innovating in filming technology. George Lucas's risk paid off, as this movie inspired so many other films afterwards, for better or for worse. I'm going to give 10 points to this segment. Okay, this is going to be tough to talk about. Hayden Christensen takes over as Anakin Skywalker. Hayden excels at playing an awkward teenager. This wasn't a new role for Hayden, as he starred as teenagers in his early career, most notably a Canadian show called Higher Ground. No, that's not a joke. Anakin, as mentioned before, is a tragic character, so his conflict in this movie is dealing with his emotions. It's compelling drama because he struggles a lot, and it's relatable. The main difference is that he's in a futuristic sci-fi setting. He's also an excellent visual actor, which was the reason George chose him, as the expressions he makes with no dialogue are simply fantastic. Ewan McGregor returns as the young Obi-Wan Kenobi. McGregor plays a frustrated detective, struggling to keep his apprentice on a leash. The chemistry between him and Anakin is great, leads to a lot of funny lines, and when he's not with Anakin, the contrast with his calmer nature elevates both sides of McGregor's role. McGregor does convincingly play the younger Obi-Wan, as he shares the same mannerisms as Alec Guinness, while still bringing a unique take to the role. He brings on his own charisma. Natalie Portman comes back as Padme Amidala, now a senator. Natalie Portman has been criticized for being wooden in her prequel performance. I can see where these criticisms come from, and without knowing better, I might agree with them. However, the fact that Portman is playing a politician, along with the fact that Lucas likes an old-fashioned style of acting, means that I think Portman gives a decent performance and does a serviceable job to the character. Frank Oz returns as Yoda. Frank Oz plays a slightly younger Master Yoda in a more serious role. Given this was before Yoda was stuck on a swamp planet with no friends, Yoda is a more level-headed and sane Jedi. I never really liked Frank Oz's voice that much. I do like him here because he's not playing a cheeky puppet, but rather a fully realized wise leader at the peak of the Republic. Oz gives a decent performance, as he improves on the campiness of Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back. Christopher Lee plays Count Dooku. Lee was actually offered the role of Tarkin back in the 70s, but he declined only to realize his mistake post-release. This time, he was not gonna fuck up his chance again. Christopher Lee is one of the best actors in this movie. He plays a posh, classy man with a British accent, like a James Bond villain. Except Dooku is not really a villain. He has his own political beliefs for independence from a corrupt republic. Lee was always a treat, and his role here makes me think it was lucky he declined the role of Tarkin. Samuel L. Jackson, the bad motherfucker, slams his presence down as Mace Windu. He's as badass as he is in a Tarantino movie. He has the personality of a monk, but still manages to kick ass. His line delivery is so quotable.
This party's over.
He doesn't appear in the movie much, but he brings on his A game and leaves an impact. Now this is what you call an actor. Also, Jackson had the idea to give Windu a purple lightsaber. Tamara Morrison has multiple roles as Jango Fett and the clones. Morrison has such a cool sounding New Zealand accent, and it's no wonder he starred in so many Star Wars video games as either Jango or the clones. His awesome, distinct voice and ruthless demeanor that Morrison was the perfect fit for Jango. As for the clones, his voice is perfect for an army of the same DNA, a voice you'll have to hear quite often. I'm going to give 8 points to the acting. This might be getting repetitive, but the soundtrack is bloody amazing. As long as John Williams is involved with these movies, you know it's gonna be great. Well, except for... Atmospheric music is phenomenal. Camino has to be my favorite. It's a sci-fi detective-esque sounding tune that makes you anticipate Obi-Wan's continuing investigation into the assassin. The Battle of Geonosis is one of the best compositions in the series, as the grandiose, epic battle of mindless clones and droids in all-out warfare, destroying large numbers of each other, is only escalated with the soundtrack. The high energy of the song produces the high-stakes tone quite effectively. The film hits the right note every scene, whether it be the Coruscant chase, the scenes on Naboo, or even when Anakin goes mental. I've mentioned before in the Phantom Menace review that the clarity on sound effects was superb. The same stuff applies here. New sound effects here are really atmospheric, whether it be sound from the cantina or the Geonosian weaponry. It's a great addition as always. The sounds are always A grade. I'm going to give 10 points to the music/sound. Another prequel, another expansion. This film fleshes out the Star Wars universe more than The Phantom Menace did, while expanding on what it did too. The only thing holding this movie back from S tier is some questionable decisions in production and the way George approached certain scenes and whatnot. There's a few sprinkles of poor writing here and there, but not as much as people make it out to be. This movie was considered the worst of the original 6 Star Wars films, and I am tempted to agree, but least good does not always equal bad. But many people hated this movie the most. That is, until a certain other movie took its thunder. I hope I'm really hyping up the black sheep of the bunch before we get to it. Attack of the Clones has earned a total of 43 points out of 50, equaling an 8.6 out of 10 score. I'm surprised that Empire Strikes Back is the weakest of what I've reviewed so far, getting an 8. Jesus, I'm not going to make many friends with this choice, but I just think Empire Strikes Back is severely overrated. Attack of the Clones is a world-building masterpiece, but falls short of certain aspects. I'm JJ Plagiarisms, and until next time, what are stories about mystery boxes?
Water was running, children were running, you were running out of time. Under the mountain, a golden fountain, were you praying at the Laurel shrine? But oh, your city